Well, hey there, it's me, a cat, and this is Yamina, and she's doing a wave at you. How you doing today? Hopefully you're doing just peachy keen. Thank you for coming in and paying attention for even a brief moment to this little video here. I was going to talk about Verena a little bit. She's one of the goddesses of knowledge in the old world, the old Warhammer fantasy setting. She's like the goddess of knowledge within the Empire, and she is also like the goddess of knowledge for like the southern regions like Tilia and Estalia, and all that fun stuff. And something that was kind of interesting to me, and I might talk about this more in another video, but I was recently listening to Blood Meridian. It's a book that I really like Cormac McCarthy's writing style, and just the way he writes characters and the sort of like matter of factness of his prose, and I think it's really good. It's really captivating. It's not like a lot of like really fancy speeches or things like that. It's mostly pretty down to earth and pretty just like, this is what happened, this is what's happening, and it doesn't try to distract you too much by like going on these meandering uh things, like, and some of the language he uses to describe things is very, very just interesting. Like, I there's a line about like coal. It was so cold it cracked stone, or like it was cold enough to crack stone. And then um there's a line about like these basalt bishops overlooking like these group of travelers, and it's just like, it's just all these really, really neat little things, and I really enjoy it. But there's an interesting part in there, and it's a part that I sometimes revisit, is that the Judge Holden talks about war, and he talks about like the nature of war, and he kind of describes war as God. And I thought this was kind of an interesting, it's an interesting take. I obviously would not necessarily agree in the sense that that's the only thing that's God. Although in some sense, yes, God is a part of war. God is a part of, both violence and peace. That's like one of the really interesting things about God, is that it functions within paradox. Like, it has this paradoxical unity about it, where it includes the opposites on a certain level. Right? It's not just the nice, peaceful moments where everything's going okay. It's also like the chaotic moments and things like that. And I thought that was interesting. And I thought it was interesting to think about this in terms of like the Warhammer gods, because the goddess Verena is she's a very interesting goddess to me, and she's one that I kind of wish there was more. There's a little bit of lore on her, but obviously a good portion of the lore mostly focuses on Sigmar, and I've already done a video on like the cult of Sigmar, and talking a little bit about like Sigmar himself and things like that. And it's something that's very interesting to me, though, just the way that like these various different gods kind of interact. And for my own free city of Sigmar, I kind of have them worshiping basically like Myrmidia and Verena in their own sort of way, like as lesser deities, just because I thought these are two of my favorite deities in the whole Warhammer fantasy setting. I think that they're particularly interesting. And Myrmidia, she has a lot of these aspects, like kind of being like Athena, in the sense that she is a goddess of knowledge as well, but she's more of a goddess of knowledge in the sense of, sorry, I have to move notes around so I can actually read some of these. But she's kind of more of a goddess of knowledge in the sense of like war to a certain extent, but she's also a goddess of knowledge just in like terms of science and things like that as well. And she's actually, and her and Verena are related. Verena is actually like the mother of both Myrmidia and Shalia. So that's also another kind of interesting aspect there, in that you have these two sister goddesses, Shalia is all about healing and peace and things like that, and then Myrmidia is all about like justice and warfare, and not like warfare in the sense of like, yeah, go out and rage and kill in a way like corn or something like that, and it's not like the cruel, uncaring kind of nature of warfare, like the warfare of like as a contest of like survival of the fittest, like you kind of get with Ulrich. It's the warfare of like justice and like using tactics and science and knowledge and your own temperament, kind of controlling your temperament so that you can actually I think this one here. Yay, shoulder plate. I always like getting the shoulder plates. I think they make the armor kind of tie the armor together. I could try out this Initiate's Claymore. I kind of like having... Oh. It's weird, because sometimes it lets me just do this, and then other times it makes me do this and unequip. Yeah, there. I'll try out the Claymore. Champion, let's see. You shouldn't be too hard to kill, huh? Come down here, bud. Thank you. But they have this like interesting little family dynamic, and you have, the family of gods from like the south, and like they're all kind of related. And it's also interesting because if you think about it, Shalia and Myrmidia come from the union of Moor and Verena. So this kind of interesting thing where it's like, the god of knowledge and also, the god of death, coming in union together, creates this, well, I don't think I quite will be able to. This will help a little, but I don't think it'll actually let me beat him. Oh my god, no, I don't think so. Unless I get, oh, so close. I think if I had a slightly better healing potion that, oh wait, I totally killed him. Hey, that's neat. Tactics. That was it. I was using brain tactics, but they have this like kind of interesting thing going on there where like both death and knowledge come together to form like this element of like healing, but also this element of warfare, but just warfare. And I think she's very interesting. So once I claim my reward here, I'm going to do a little bit of reading on about her and some of my notes I have here before I continue on. And I know it's only 8 minutes into the video where I'm supposed to be talking about her, but I had these things where, I thought that these were interesting. Uh, eh. I'll keep getting some more tokens. I'll keep using this big sword for a little bit. But, yeah, I think it'd be secure over here, and we can kind of look around. Okay, so Verena is the god of knowledge, science, law, and justice in the old world pantheon. In the pantheon of the gods, some myths place her as the bride of Mor, the god of the dead. This might seem unlikely pairing at first, but the two deities are united by common themes of judgment, simply overseeing different aspects of the concept. Where Mor judges the dead, it falls to Verena to judge the living. Verena is also thought to be the mother of Shalia, and in some parts of the old world of Myrmidia as well. Verena is probably the goddess of the old world pantheon who is closest in nature to the gods of law, but without taking their extreme and inhumanely stolid views as her own. Verena is not just the patron of just decisions and balance, but she is also regarded as a wise teacher, for it is said that she lifted mankind from its barbarous roots with the giving of writing. It is for this act that she's also held as the mother of learning, reason, and discourse. A stoic and serious goddess, Verena is a benevolent force to whom many appeal for 2. For freedom from despotism. Indeed, despite her benevolence and civility, Verena has a definite martial streak as the goddess of justice. Some theologians claim that this was not always the case, but when chaos was unleashed upon the world and Ulrich tried to rally the gods against the threat, Verena was the only one who took his warning seriously. She took up Mor's sword and rode into battle behind Ulrich, shaming her fellow gods into action in the process. Her priest claimed she understands more than any other the importance of wisdom and learning and the need to defend them from ignorance and destruction with force of arms necessary. Other scholars believe that Verena could be an aspect of the elven goddess Hoeth, or of the god of law Daora. Daora? I'm not sure. An ancient deity representing pure total knowledge. No seat of power, although both High Priest Manfred Archibald and High Priestess Merik van der Person are prominent and somewhat dominant authority figures in the cult. And they do have some holy books here. The Canticum Verena, Elogium Verena, the Book of Swords, although all books are considered holy to Verena. So literally all books are in some sense holy, although I would argue probably not chaos books to a certain extent. And her holy symbols are the owl representing wisdom, is Verena's primary symbol. A pair of scales representing justice is sometimes used as a sword point, as is a sword pointing downwards. I think that this is a fairly interesting deity in that she's, she understands, like, that you can't just be like inhumane and have all these horribly like stolid views. Everything has to be done a certain way and things like that. She's the goddess of knowledge and learning, like in general, and if you imagine worshiping her with the other members of the pantheon, Myrmidia and Shalia, you get this like these three goddesses who really, I think, kind of personify like a benevolent sphere of goddesses, and three that I think are probably very much worth worshiping. And like there's some gods in the old world where I'm just kind of like, well, like Sigmar's cool, and I like Sigmar, but he also has a lot of crazy people following him, where it seems like the cult of Verena and the cult of Myrmidia are just in general much more I would say to just make much more sense. But I'm also a cat who loves me some logic and reason, although I also embrace me some chaos. But in this setting, when you say chaos, sometimes that literally means like weird tentacle monsters, and I'm not really into that part. I don't really know why you need to. I mean, I guess if you're just really into like your Lovecraft deities and stuff like that, if you just really want to worship your your Yogg-Sothoth, which Yogg-Sothoth is also interesting, but completely separate video to talk about Yogg-Sothoth at some point. And there's also a bunch of stuff about the cult of Verena. I'm not gonna read all this because there was like 15 pages of stuff. The cult of, the thing on the cult of Verena starts with "Speak truth, be truth." Common farewell between cultists of Verena. The first phrase is said by one person, the last phrase by the other. Speak truth, be truth. I really like this. I aspire to never do a lying, and for the most part, I have been very good about this. Occasionally, I will like say a little. I have caught myself on a couple of times saying like a little white lie, but I try very hard to catch myself in that and to never like allow myself to say a lie. And I don't think I've lied in quite some time, and I don't really think I've even said a little white lie in quite some time. So, well, on both, I try not to keep track of the time because it's like, oh man, it's been like 6 months. Can you believe it? It's like I don't know. That's not really just the kind of way I roll. But I think it's very important to spread truth, and it's kind of a big thing. I think that you can make better decisions when you know the whole story, and I think that's why I think it's important to go around and try to share and spread as much truth as possible. Now, in some cases, it's like you can't just come out and say the direct truth. Like, okay, I could talk about like how I think the American Empire is evil and decaying, but like if I walk up to some random person who isn't like read on any of this stuff, and I just start talking about that, that doesn't, like, yeah, that may be the truth, but like, you start somewhere a little bit lighter and try to sort of ease them into like a greater understanding of the nature of that part of reality and like the nature of like state building and statecraft and things like that. But I really like Verena and Myrmidia because I think they kind of try to get you to strive to build up um, a better world and like try to hold yourself to certain standards and principles. I also like them because I think they're a little bit less anti-magic than Sigmar is. Like Sigmar himself is not super anti-magic, and obviously you can uh, have a certain amount of magic practice as a Sigmarite, but like there's a lot of like witch hunters and stuff like that. And to be fair, unsanctioned wizards and things like that are a threat and they are dangerous. But I think I like it when they're a little bit less negative towards them. The Cult of Verena is the official organization dedicated to the Old World goddess of justice. Although the Empire and the rest of the Old World face the war, plague, and calamity with disturbing regularity, is the rule of law and ordered society that enables the Empire and other nations to not only survive but thrive. Indeed, those who venerate Ulrich, and to a lesser extent Sigmar, may be concerned with violence and warfare, but it is the philosophical doctrines of justice espoused by the priests of Verena that prevents the Empire from sliding into a complete tyranny. I see. I also like that too. Like the idea of, oh, did I? Oh, I didn't. I didn't heal myself after I died. Like the idea there of like, um, fighting is like, if fighting is important. Like you do need your gods of war like Ulrich and Sigmar, and you need warriors and things like that. But you do also need people who are willing to question like authority, and they're willing to question like why things are being done, and really have like a strong philosophy that kind of adds order and elements of order to the society of the empire. And it's like a constant struggle because there's plenty of corruption, and there's plenty of like just like weird institutions and things like that, and there's also like always power games in the empire. But they're striving to make this true like balance, and they're striving to like make the empire a better place, and to talk about like the philosophy of knowledge and the philosophies of power, and like they want to stop it from becoming a tyranny, because they want this, it's also like the philosophy of justice that they are very concerned with, and don't want, people just like abusing their power or their or anything like that. And I think that's very noble, and that's part of the reason I like her so much, and I like her cult so much. In the Pantheon of the Gods, some myths place... Okay, so it's kind of beating. A stoic and serious god, she was benevolent force whom many appeal to for freedom from despotism. Verena is not just the patron of just decisions and balance, but she's also regarded as a wise teacher. And some of this is just like repeats from the earlier part, so I'm not going to say all that. And but I do think that stuff is important to mention. Although she is predisposed to order, law, and justice, there is little formal hierarchy within the cult. Instead, it operates in small cells, scattered throughout the centers of civilization, being prevalent in districts that are given over to scholarly pursuits, where they run where they run or fund universities to promote learning and education. Verena's cults have great influence in the empire, with individual cultists serving as advisors in nobles' courts, and in some places such as Nome, they function as judiciaries, working ceaselessly to ensure the rule of law holds sway. So, you know, if you're really into the idea of like trying to, in a place that is not necessarily lawless, but a place that has a lot of trouble with law and like criminals and things like that, if you're into the idea of trying to like maintain that order and things like that, they are very much like the kind of people you would like want to hang out with and want to get close to and want to get kind of an understanding with. Why are you in a red thong, bud? Well, it's actually not a thong, but it's fine. It's fine. As a direct result of its obsession with knowledge, the cult of Verena tends to find itself the center of controversy more often than not. Far more than other rival cults. Among some of its more radical members of the cult's clergy, there's a belief that all writing, no matter its contents, is worth protecting. Such views put the cult at odds with the witch hunters and specifically the cult of Sigmar, who would see such heretical texts consigned to purifying fires. This is a point of serious contention within the cult. It was also a disagreement the Verenians are willing to set aside to protect the overarching interests of the cult. To make matters worse, the Verenian cult often caused controversy among other religions, for some of the more radical interpretations of its scriptures are viewed as heretical by other faiths. It often ends up in conflict with other cults as a result, and can end up forming unlikely alliances also as a result. The cult is prepared to put its beliefs above traditions and friendships regardless of short-term consequences, just as cultists are expected to be unbiased and not unfairly favor friends and allies above enemies. As a result, outsiders sometimes view Verenians as being unreliable and fickle. Relations are most strained between the cults of Verena and cults of Sigmar, with each vying for control of the Empire's legal system, and each taking opposed stances when it comes to the control of dubious literature. The cult of Verena in Altdorf has taken advantage of the recent turmoil within the cult of Sigmar to gain more of a foothold in finding the city's leaders to be better disposed to their less doctrinal ways. Which, yeah, I mean, I think there is something to be said for the cult of Sigmar. I mean, it's not like certain literature and things are not dangerous, but the cult of Sigmar kind of is kind of full of fanatics and a lot of people who are willing to burn like literally anything that even disagrees with them in the slightest. And I think it's like you do kind of need the cult of Sigmar to like root out chaos, and like witch hunters do have an important job. We can't pretend that they're, you know, not doing something important and that they're just, you know, entirely full of falsehood. Like the truth is that some places in the empire have chaos cults. Some places do need to have excuse me, certain amounts of literature and things like that restricted. Some monsters need to be put down. There is a thing there. But at the same time, because of their overzealousness in this, that does put them into conflict with the cult of Verena. And it's kind of interesting to see, you know, who takes what side and why. I mean, for me personally, I would prefer as much knowledge be available as possible. Maybe not like grimoires, like actual grimoires, you know, like the... Oh, goodness. Let me see, wait. Like for instance, grimoires that actually tell you how to, like, summon undead or tell you how to, do stuff like that. That doesn't necessarily need to be, disseminated, but at the same time, like, you never know. Like, knowledge is important. And it's important to share that knowledge and to keep as open of a mind as you possibly can about like certain things, even things that are kind of crazy sounding when you you know, you go into it. Like you know, I'm someone who likes to read a lot of texts that were considered heretical at the time, and I like to think about them. I also, you know, read a lot of people who are at least at one point kind of considered, okay, what? Oh, it's you. Or, you know, kind of considered like bad texts for one reason or another. And some of those texts are just like it's kind of crazy how like many how many texts there are out there that are just like, you know, in a lot of ways perfectly innocuous, but because they disagree even slightly with like the prevailing elements of power at the time, uh they'll be like banned. And that's another thing to consider, is that like you need people like the cult of Verena, otherwise like the state can have complete and total control over all information. The state can use the cult of Sigmar to like ban a lot of information. It's not really something that I think is it's not necessarily like there's no threat about just like if the cult of Sigmar was the only cult for it to not be a problem. And we even see this like now in kind of an Age of Sigmar and in more recent uh, days. And I'm going to read just a couple more sections here, and then we'll call it good for now, because there's a lot. But and you can look up the Cult of Verena. There's a lot of different information out there. It's pretty interesting. Beware of doubt, but beware more of those who have no doubt, is a Verenian saying. As part of the cult's mandate to spread the ideas of learning and justice, there are some Verenian priests who take to wandering the old world as missionaries. These missionaries travel to lands where tyrants rule, Kislev, Bretonnia, and the Border Princes, for example, where the ideas of justice and learning are either ignored or set aside in favor of despotism. This does not make the missionaries popular with the rulers of such lands, and many actively persecute priests of Verena as a result, whether missionaries or not. 3 missionaries were recently executed in Brionne, where they were accused of working with as anarchists and dangerous dissidents. Their executors were not the local nobility, but the peasants themselves, who did not want the rabble-rousing priest to bring any unwanted attention from the nobility. This accusation is not without precedence, however. More than one tyrant has been brought down by trouble inspired by Verenian rhetoric, and many would soon act preemptively and risk the wrath of the cult of Verena than that of their people. So these guys are also kind of revolutionary in their own way, and that's pretty awesome. And the last thing I'm going to share here is their strictures. Safeguard knowledge at all costs, for it is the foundation stone for civilization. All knowledge is equally important. Preserve your judgment from fear or favor. Speak the truth impartially. Arbitrate disputes whenever you can. Do not refuse when asked to do so. Do not allow yourself to become a tool of injustice or heresy. Combat is a last resort, but do not fear to wield the sword of justice. See, these guys are, I really like them. They're very reasonable, and, you know, you combine this with, like, the Cult of Remedia, and I'm just like, oh, man, I really like these two a lot. And then I look at the Cult of Sigmar, and I'm just like, oh, you guys are a bunch of crazy fanatics. I'm going over here with the Owl Lady. The Owl Lady is cool. She has scales and things. What do you have? A big hammer? I mean, yeah, Sigmar is cool, but you guys are fucking nuts. And, I mean, they're not all nuts, and, of course, there's different levels in each cult as like the exact nature of how crazy or not some of them are. I personally think it's very interesting to take note of. But yeah, I rather like the Cult of Verena. They're pretty cool. And I just wanted to share some of that information with you guys, and, you know, babble about some of my thoughts on them and thought about my thoughts on their rule within the Empire. I think they're really cool. I think they're a very neat bit of world building that you don't necessarily often see in a lot of fantasy. Like, you know, there's a lot of stuff in Warhammer Fantasy that is pretty much just like, you know, like a slightly grimmer version of stuff you get elsewhere, but I think there's also particularly stuff that's really good. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to me babble about Verena and like her place within the Empire and just, why I think she's a cool god in general. And I hope that you all have an absolutely wonderful day. And remember to uh, give hugs and love and justice and things. And God loves you, I love you, and everybody else loves you. And many loves and hugs, loves, love you, bye, bye, love you, bye. Bye, love you, bye.